Welcome to this week's edition of Inter-University Debate, which is brought to you by Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV. I'm your moderator. My name is Lake Gender Fancy. Today, I'm joined by students of Muteesa, the first Royal University. You're welcome to the Inter-University Debate.
Thank you.
Okay, so I can see only new faces for today's talk show. We are happy to always host you. So we are answering the question of, is Uganda's public debt sustainable? So Uganda's budget was read last year, and as we know, this budget is over 48,000 billion Uganda shillings. Out of that, we also listened to the Minister of Finance, and he read we have over 73 trillion Uganda shillings in debt. So the students of Muteesa, the first Royal University, are going to look into all those statistics today. Now, the BOU, that is Bank of Uganda, also released a report and stated that most of Uganda's debt is external debt. That means that most of Uganda's debt is from external sources, such as multilateral international organizations like World Bank, IMF, and then other commercial organizations internationally, like the Exim Bank of China, and as well as domestic borrowing, even though external borrowing occupies the biggest percentage of Uganda's debt. So we are going to answer that question looking at the different statistics from IMF, from World Bank, from Bank of Uganda, as well as the national budget. So before we delve into the discussion, let me introduce the panelists for today. I'm going to start with the gentleman that is seated next to me, and that is Mr. Fahad Muchunguzi. He's a student pursuing Bachelor's of Mass Communication. Fahad, you're welcome to the Inter-University Debate.
Thank you, madam.
Okay. Our second panelist is the only lady on the panel, and that is Miss Clarissa Barbrah Nabulya. She's also pursuing Bachelor of Mass Communication. Barbrah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Our third panelist is Mr. Geofrey Arinaitwe. I hope I pronounced it well.
Yeah, that is right.
Yes, he's pursuing Bachelor of Human Resource. You're welcome to the Inter-University Debate.
Thank you.
Okay. So, like you had introduced, we are answering the question, is Uganda's public debt sustainable? Our public debt has been growing, and according to the BOU report, we are even at over 78 trillion Uganda shillings in debt. You know, so we are looking at all these statistics, and then we'll answer that question. But before we answer that question, which is the actual issue in today's discussion, let me start with you, Fahad.
Yes.
Give us a general overview of Uganda's debt, looking at the different reports that have been released.
Okay, thank you, madam, for the opportunity you've given me. I would like to remind our viewers, my name is Fahad Muchunguzi, just like she's told you. So, to come back to the topic, back to the topic of discussion, is Uganda's public debt sustainable? I usually add on public debt burden. I call it burden, so you can know where I'm going. The general overview of this is, personally, I have a view that the burden of Uganda, as far as the debt is concerned, is kind of sustainable, depending on how we do it. You know, Uganda's debt burden has been growing ever since since independence. We've been going in for borrowing, and to date, the report from the International Monetary Fund says that Uganda has a debt of about 69 trillion Uganda shillings. So, but when we come to the Independent magazine, it says as of 2020-2021, Uganda rounded it off to 70 Uganda shillings trillion. So that means that, you see, when you compare the statistical information, you see the data kind of doing what? Relating. So it simply means that ever since 2020 to 2021, now there is a growth in the debt burden. Now, Independent magazine tells us it's about 73 trillion Uganda shillings. So we see that debt being unbearable in the plain form of view. You can see it being unbearable to an extent that even it has been calculated, it's actually in hearsay by various politicians of Uganda, that at least each and every Ugandan to pay that debt has to give in about 1.5 million Uganda shillings. When one just hears about that, they might think that it is something weird, according to the statistics of the current population in Uganda. So we find it at an extent being unbearable. But today we bring you some of the ways on how we can see this debt being bearable and how we can pay off this debt. Thank you, madam.
Thank you so much, Fahad. Let me move to Clarissa. So, Clarissa, Fahad just gave us an overview of Uganda's debt burden. We have seen the statistics coming where the one says 60 trillion, the 70 trillion. The national budget says by June last year, we had over 73 trillion. BOU says 78 trillion. You know, at least we are sure that it's above the Uganda's current budget that is operating.
Yeah.
So in terms of comparing it with the international community, how are we doing in terms of the debt?
Uganda's debt is sustainable, in my opinion. The only reason here is the people responsible for clearing debts in Uganda are not doing what they're supposed to do, in my own view. But this debt is sustainable to a larger extent. Okay, there are situations that may come about, and this debt can be like these people. Maybe some situations can come along, and these people are not, and Uganda is not able to sustain its debt. But that is at a lesser extent. So in my opinion, I really think this debt can be sustainable, only that Uganda is not doing what exactly it's supposed to do. Because when you look at we are now comparing Uganda to other countries, right? When you look at the statistics, or when you follow up in terms of dates worldwide, Uganda is not even among the first 20
Most
dated,
indebted.
most dated countries. Okay, so Uganda can really sustain the debt, only that the people responsible are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, maybe because of their personal faults or anything. I don't know. People are greedy. I don't know. Yes, but Uganda can really sustain the debt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Clarissa, we'll get back to you on that to expound more on that answer of Uganda can sustain its current debt. Let me move to Geofrey. So, Geofrey, Clarissa says in terms of internationally, we are not even the first 20. Now, let's bring it back home. You know, we normally get compared a lot within the EAC, within the East African community. Right now, East African community has 7 states of Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan, Congo, and Somalia has shown interest to join. Whether they join or not, it's a question of another day. But how are we faring in terms of being indebted within the EAC?
Yeah, thank you very much. One, I would start by clearing that everyone in Uganda will have to pay about 1.5 million Uganda shillings for us to be able to complete our tax burden. So comparing this with other countries in the East African region, we look at countries that are borrowing to do investment rather than deferring to a state like Uganda, where we are borrowing money to particularly pay salaries, invest much into infrastructure, and yet the infrastructure we are investing into is not a long-term investment, or it does not basically give back return on investment compared to other countries in the East African region, like for example Kenya, where they borrow to do commercial agriculture. Our country, in the state where everyone is particularly going to be indebted to pay like 1.5 Ugandan shillings, and yet we have some of the citizens living in Uganda not affording even to live at $1 per day, and we are already having a burden where us and our children will have to depend and work hard to make sure we clear our debt. And also, looking at the debt, there has been an increase on domestic borrowing, which is going to be a bad vice, and it is increasing, where we are exploiting the private sector, which is being looked at for generating income and taxes that will be later utilized to pay the debt. We look at investors thinking of borrowing the government and not borrowing the members in the region to do investment, because particularly the government will give you a long-term time to give you back your money, but also add you more profits as compared to what the private sector will give you back. For example, banks will see more of profit borrowing the government than them borrowing to the private sector. So this means if the government takes more money through domestic debt, particularly we shall be exploited, and the Ugandans, we shall have to basically pay more money, pay more interest, there will be increase on loans. So our debt is really worrying, and it is a menace situation where we really need to look into it and revise, because it is a worrying situation and it is no longer sustainable. We need to think and rethink and rethink. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let me come back to Fahad.
Yes, madam.
So, Fahad, we recently celebrated 60 years of independence. And, you know, we are independent, 60 years, Uganda, we are independent. We sang that song, we still do sing it. But years down the road, our debt burdens are growing. What are some of the factors that are leading to the growth in the debt burden for Uganda?
Okay, thank you, madam, for that question. First and foremost, before I come to that question, I want to first reiterate on my sister's point of saying that Uganda's debts can be sustainable, but then people out there who are responsible are not doing the good thing to be done. First and foremost, what I can say about what she said is we find out that we are in a situation where Uganda's government borrows money from outside in order to cater for payments of, like members of parliament, funding infrastructure, funding various organizations. So amongst the few things that we can look up in order to cap down this debt is to, first of all, we can opt for increasing the taxes from the local people, but then that is one of the riskiest thing a country could do, because it will even lead to toppling of a government. But then I would advise as a person that better if we look into checking spending cuts. We can cut where the government spends a lot. For example, we have a burden of a parliament, I'm sorry to say that, about 460 something members of parliament, receiving at least 30 million per month. What's all that for? They can reduce the number of what? Parliamentarians. We can go ahead and look at various other places where the government spends the most. I'm giving you this kind of overview in a way that we can find at least a way to corner this kind of what? This kind of problem. We have to find a remedy that is ending the rate at which the debt is growing. So let's check the spending of the government. Then back to your question, you asked me, try to remind me.
Yes, some of the factors that are leading to the growth in the debt burden.
Yeah, just like I've been explaining, some of the factors that are leading to the growth in the debt burden. I told you, spending, government spending. Where is the government spending? The government is spending on officials, like a member of parliament or a minister could be going out for benchmarking, but you know how much they would take? Recently, I'm sorry to also say this, but some members we saw of parliament and other, high profile people in the country, when going for medical issues, they usually take planes, One of them of recent was given a full bombardier to be taken for some medical checkup. All these things show us that our debt is being invested into things that do not bring back profit. And therefore, it is one of the points where we see that money is being spent a lot and we are not receiving anything from that. So the next thing we shall see is find a country that can have as much debt as that of Japan, yet it has no infrastructure like that of Japan to help in paying off these debts. But thank God that currently Uganda has discovered black gold, that is oil. It has also discovered some great amount of gold, real gold. So when we look at all that, it gives me hope that we might find a solution to that problem of the debt. But nevertheless, let's inject more into investing the money we borrowed into productive things. Another example I can give you, when money is gotten from International Monetary Fund, from World Bank, and it is brought here in Uganda, one of my fellows here said it is just used for paying government workers. But what do we have to do? Debt actually should not be gotten in form of money. Debt should be something gotten maybe in form of high expatriate workers coming here to train our fellow Ugandans so that they can engage in more productive activities. But you look at a point where even buying just these sneakers, these shoes we're putting on, they come from China, they come from America. Why don't we invest in those machines into our country and try to train people so that we can stop borrowing money to just import things? So let's do more of exporting than importing. I think we shall be curbing down that debt.
Okay, thank you so much, Fahad. Let me get back to Clarissa. So there is something that has been coming up, issues of COVID-19. Now, when the Uganda's budget was read on, I think 14th of June last year, some of the reasons that were given by the Minister of Finance was that the COVID-19 led to the growth of the debt. And then we sit and ask, is this the actual truth that COVID-19 actually led to when the debt's already there? So my question to you is, to what extent did COVID-19 lead to the growth of Uganda's debt burden?
Okay, thank you, Miss. COVID did not lead to the burden of Uganda's debt because, number one, the Ugandan officials have really not done enough. Are you aware that those guys borrow money from wherever, from China, World Bank, and yes, they borrow money, but that money is in their accounts. They borrow money, but they do not plan for it. Okay, and this has been happening even before COVID-19. So, okay, COVID kind of weakened the economy of Uganda and maybe damaged the budget as well. But it's not the real reason as to why the debt is alarming. The debt burden is alarming, okay? Because these officials are even imposing some amounts of money on the infrastructures. They're borrowing money in the name of building or developing infrastructures in Uganda, but they're actually not using this money. So this money, I had some MP say that this money is still in their accounts. So meaning they borrow money with no budget for it. So there is no way one can be saying that COVID-19 is the main lead to the alarming situation of Uganda's debt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Clarissa. Let me get to Geofrey one more time. So, Geofrey, now Uganda borrows money in terms of different issues. There are scenarios where Uganda borrows actual money and then implements their different projects. And then there are situations like the one for Entebbe Express Highway where Uganda got money for it specifically from Exim Bank of China to fund a project which was the road construction. Now, a bigger percentage of the money Uganda gets is to borrow money and then it implements. What is your perspective on Uganda borrowing money and implements various projects versus borrowing money to fund a specific project and that project is used to pay back the loan?
Yeah, thank you very much. It could be a good perspective where Uganda's borrow to implement a project that has return on investment, and it is better when the loan that is borrowed, it has high ability for it to repay the loan itself, minus us incurring more costs to service the loan. I can give you an example that, for example, Uganda, we borrow because there isn't need, but there is a want. For example, you talked about the Entebbe Express that was invested with a loan from Exim Bank in China. When you look at the road, it is not the same quality that is in China. We have highways in China that are attracting way large numbers of people to basically go there and do tourism. The roads are large enough to accommodate the traffic, but even before completion of the Entebbe Express Highway, we see people being displaced, we see people struggling, we see government officials incurring more money on their own needs, like purchasing of various cars that can be used for project implementation. We do not have most of the contractors being Ugandan, so that even if we are having a loan from China, we can utilize it ourselves. This can be basically done through the local investments or partnerships, where we have this money being utilized by our own entities in the countries, like the construction companies, like the service companies, architectural companies. But you find out that you're receiving a loan from Exim Bank, the road contractor is from China, the architect is from China, and then it is a total mess. You're borrowing just to accomplish a want, not a need. So we really need to change our perspective of borrowing to do actual implementation, where we have a work plan, where we've already drafted the budgets and costs of the project we want to implement, rather than Exim Bank saying, or IMF, hello Uganda, we have money to invest in agriculture to uplift the lives, and then you go borrow the money. Come ask the Ugandans, can we invest in this? Can we invest in this? Can we do this? We need to change our perspective. The government leaders and the officials that are responsible for attaining this money, we borrow with a plan. We have strategic ways that this money will be refunded in this way, not us borrowing and receiving money first and then think of a way we shall repay the money. Yeah.
Okay, Geoffrey, just on that.
Yeah.
So would you say it was a good idea for Uganda to do project finance? That is borrowing for a project like Entebbe Express Highway, and then the money is used to pay back. A road is constructed and then the road user fees are paid and the money is used to pay back the loan.
Well, I could not say it was a good idea, simply because we have high traffic on the road, but even the road that was constructed, it does not fit the traffic that we aimed at basically removing. We see more accidents on the road. There is safety on the road, which we had high expect that when we borrow this money, we are changing the lives of people, basically travelers and people coming back. And yet we have other revenues that have not received money for investment, and yet they have high return on investment. We look at us borrowing money, which has a way long-term payment plan, which does not suit our country, because we basically depend on the forecast of the future incomes. Yet we've not exploited what does the future bring we are hustling with various changes, and then we have money that is basically coming in to do or to suit the provider's need, not our need. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now let me move to Fahad. So Fahad, we have heard people say Uganda borrows money and does not use it for the actual right purpose all over the media. Now this makes me ask this question. So when Uganda borrows from the different, whether it being internally or externally, what are some of the things that you would say Uganda should invest in?
Yeah, just like I said earlier, when Ugandans receive that money that is gotten from outside, we should look at our country investing in productive work. For example, I've been telling you that instead of importing a lot of commodities from outside, we should actually invest in skilling the Ugandans. We could put up institutions, we could put up technical colleges, we can put up many things using that money. I told you that we import sneakers, we import shoes, we import clothing. But what about if we just put a lot of effort in agriculture, we grow sisal, we grow many things from which we can make those products, and just import expatriates, foreign expatriates into our country to help us man our industries, and thereafter we can pay them off and we leave Ugandans working in those industries. A good example is in Kapeka, those industrial areas that now are being constructed. You find out that those industries are now trying to bring up what Uganda should exactly be doing. It should have been doing it some time back, but it has just realized it has just kicked the blanket. So we see that currently Uganda is manufacturing military vehicles. When you go up in areas of Choga, Nakasongola, those industries are there. So that's what we want to see our government do with the loan they acquire from outside. The next thing our government has to do, it actually has known to import papers into our country that you've imported. You have brought American dollars. What for? They're even not backed up. You understand? There are petrodollars we know about, money that is backed up by either gold or by oil. So we find out that we are being given papers manufactured from some other families in America. The International Monetary Fund gives us that we've given you a box of $1 trillion to go fund your things. Why that? I think our government should look into, I'm stressing this because I feel it brings, like, it even makes me feel like emotional when I'm talking about it, because when you look at import, like borrowing actual money, actual paper is not good. At least bring equipment from countries. In case International Monetary Fund says we are purchasing machinery from Japan to construct maybe hospitals, to construct markets, then you can pay us off in the long run. That would be better. But you find us just borrowing money, then to come and start paying off. Even some officials here within the country start swindling to build arcades, to build their apartments. So we find it not making sense. It would be better if we borrow tangible things, not paper money that's not backed up by anything. And it would still be better in case we invest in skilling Ugandans with the money at least we have borrowed. I really feel that would cause a great impact to our nation and would be able to pay back those loans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me move back to Clarissa. So Clarissa, as I gave in the introduction, Uganda's debt, most of it comes from external sources like IMF, World Bank, and so forth, other international multilateral organizations. And a lot of times it comes with issues of democracy, rule of law, promote this in your country, and yet Uganda still goes ahead and, borrows. And then Exim Bank of China, it will come with, like we saw the one for Entebbe Express Highway. It came with, either pay, or if you fail to pay, we take something of a national asset, a government asset. So what is your perspective on Uganda having a bigger percentage of its loan coming externally, given the different factors that surround it?
First of all, who budgets for the money that comes from the external bodies, external organizations like the IMF?
It's the Ministry of Finance.
We have Ministry of Finance.
Do
that
they
does
really have the budget before they borrow this money? Do they really come up with a budget?
Oh, Clarissa is interviewing us now.
No, like
So-
I'm not trying to interview you,
Yes.
but I'm only concerned because if these guys really had a budget before borrowing money, the debt wouldn't have been alarming, like, you know.
Okay, so Clarissa, your issue is
Mm.
Uganda should have a specific budget
before borrowing
for
money.
the loans, because right now most of the times the government borrows to fund the existing budget.
Mm.
So you are saying Uganda should have a specific budget for the loans that they are borrowing.
Yes, because Uganda is borrowing to fund its budget. But what is in the budget? In the budget, you may find Uganda wanting to buy new posh cars for the MPs, cars that are very, very expensive, and people in the village are there suffering. They don't have any startup to help them maybe put up something like, okay, Uganda usually hides in agriculture, but it's not even doing good in agriculture. So why don't they include in the budget? Why can't agriculture take a big percentage of the budget before they borrow money? I think Uganda is supposed to be putting agriculture first before they even think of buying posh cars for the MPs and maybe giving them those very big salaries, because that is what in most cases takes a lot of money in the Uganda's budget.
Okay.
Yeah, and usually they talk about infrastructure development, but the roads, most roads in Uganda don't even make it to the amount of money that they usually say they put in. You know, now for example, there's a road, Ginger Road. You may find these people saying that they put a lot of money in maybe making that road, but the road is full of potholes. It is causing accidents every day. So the budget is having a lot of, I'm not trying to attack anyone, but Uganda's budget is having a lot of nonsense. Yes, because, yeah, these guys are just greedy. Because how can you plan for the whole country? Remember, a lot of people are suffering there. They don't even have capital to start up anything. And most of them can be very good farmers. If Uganda says it is an agricultural state or country, they can't give capital to those people to start up something. They can't even fund the common how do they coffee? Is it coffee?
The cash
No,
crops.
cash crops.
Yeah, cash crops.
We have coffee.
Yeah, they can't even fund those common things. They're rather what they are doing, they're just beating them up, because days back or some months back, the government was trying to put up very difficult laws for the people who engage in growing coffee. Yet Uganda says it is an agriculture state. So, in my opinion, the budget is full of nonsense. Yes, I'm
Okay.
not attacking anyone, but honestly, they should look into it.
Into their priorities in the
And
budget.
also to
Yeah.
add something is
Yes, Geofrey.
like particularly the government is not only borrowing to fund its budget, but also borrowing to pay off some existing loans. And you can imagine, you have a loan, a long-term loan. The problem with Ugandans is that we borrow loans that have a long payment plan, which is not so much calculated, as we always articulate. By the time it comes, we shall have gotten back the money. And when we borrow the money, it is not used for investments that bring high return. And we are looking at us borrowing money that is utilized to fund the budget. For example, constructions of hospitals, that everyone knows we have good hospitals in Uganda. But we are seeing MPs collapsing in their own regions, and they need to be airlifted back to Kampala or to other regions in the East African region. And then from there, someone comes up with a budget. We have now back 40 million to construct the hospital where the MP collapsed from. So is it that all Ugandans, we should pray that all our members of parliament collapse in our areas so that the government can come in? And leaving alone that, we want to see MPs or government officials die of water scarcity in their region. Some MP die, and then we shall have more loan money brought into good use. For example, construction of more water resources, more boreholes in the regions, because we have this money budgeted, but it does not reach on the ground. We have loan money not utilized, but it is there, and it is used by the government officials basically to do their own projects, which is not really good, and it is a burden to us, the Ugandans, not them that are borrowing the money. Yeah.
Okay, so before I get back to this too, Clarissa, you have something to add?
Yeah.
Okay, let me finish something with
Okay.
Geoffrey. So Geoffrey, you earlier on talked about Uganda should stop the vice of domestic borrowing. Now, there's a question I asked Clarissa, which I'll also push to you. Now, external borrowing, we have IMF and World Bank. Sometimes there are issues of, like I told, the issues of rule of law, democracy, human rights, you know. And then Exim Bank of China will say, okay, we'll give you the money, but if you don't pay, we will take a state property. We saw the fever that ran across Uganda when we had that Entebbe airport was being taken.
Yeah.
So what is your perspective on external borrowing coming with strings attached to it?
Yes, one thing I would like to say is that we have more countries that want to borrow or to give us more loans. But why do we really focus on some countries? Like, for instance, we had Russia that had partnership with us to construct the oil pipeline and also exploit the Albertine resources. But when we saw the president go to the US, he received another contract. But we had Russia on board. Don't you think we can shift from China and then open our investments to other foreigners? People have their money. We are not marketing our country. We basically want to tie ourselves on potential people who want to exploit their money. When Exim Bank gives you their money, they have their terms. We have the constructors. All the contractors, all the construction materials are going to come from China. Why do you have to kill yourself? You take poison, I'm taking poison, and you know it will kill you. Let's open our investments that have high return on investments to the world market, not to only particularly some countries, or maybe the World Bank, or maybe IMF, Exim Bank. Let's open our investments to the world market. We cannot only keep on borrowing, but attracting investors to come and invest the money that we could have attained as loans. Though they will need back some money to take back to their homes, but it is not the same that particularly is used to service the loans. I think basically we need to shift our mindset from focusing on particular countries for loans, particular people who have been borrowing us money like consistent. We need to change. We need to move to other regions that are basically doing. Let's say we can attract Toyota to come to Uganda and open up more factories rather than us borrowing money to invest in our car making companies. I think we have that money, and already we have so far, I think, assembled not less than 50 cars, but we have an assembling plant that is going to be equitable to the one of Toyota, and they are doing multiple productions in their region. But us, we are utilizing the money not even to the need. We can attract investors but not borrow. That could be my perspective, and also opening up all our resources to people who would want to invest. Why would I borrow money to invest in a hospital? Yet I have someone who is going to come and construct an international specialized hospital. That could be better. Yeah.
Have something
Okay.
on that.
Okay, yes, Fahad. Then we will have Clarissa.
So, you know, there is something I wanted to hear from my fellows. When you talk about strings attached, I want to hear it mentioned. Someone says, I'm giving you this money, but I want you to implement human rights. I'm giving you this money, but I want you to implement democracy. You know, after colonialism, now the white man sat down and he was like, how am I going back to Africa? In history, when we were studying in secondary, they told us that there was a common phrase that a white man left through the front door and then came back through the what? The back door. I see many countries that are being affected by the issue of democracy and human rights, and then know that maybe this was the portal through which the white man used to come back to where? To Africa. And how is that portal being made open every now and then? It is through the continuous financing of countries, through giving them loans. You know, when you feel like you don't have a strong backbone and you can't stand, then you seek someone else to give you some support. So we find out that such debts with strings attached are affecting us so much. So when you come from, the West and the US, then you come to China, they're like, if you're not paying back the debt, then we are taking some national projects like the airport. That is also something not good. So what is my view on that? For the white man, for the West and America, my view is that Uganda should look keenly where it has the greatest potential. We are crossed by the equator. We have some good climatic conditions that can support our agriculture. We have tourism. Some time back, when Winston Churchill visited this country, if I'm not mistaken, he said that indeed Uganda is the pearl of what? Of Africa. So through that, we need to discover our own potentials so that when someone is coming to borrow us anything, be it money or some tangible asset, they are not having strings attached to their what? To their borrowing or to the money they are bringing us, but they should be rather thinking of an independent Uganda, just like other developed countries, even when we are not yet there. So I stress that we should look at the critical areas where we are strong enough so we can have our backbone very strong and no one will have to do what? To minimize us and give us what? Conditions or strings attached like democracy, human rights, or even taking our national what? National assets. Thank you.
Okay, Fahad, before I bring Clarissa in, is it bad to be asked to implement democracy, rule of law, human rights? Is it bad when World Bank or IMF ask Uganda, before I give you this money, implement these projects? If I don't see human rights, if I don't see democracy, then we can't give you money.
You know, this thing of democracy and this thing, when someone hears of democracy, then the opposite thing they will think of is dictatorship. But countries, ever since time immemorial, had their own ways of governance. And in that kind of governance, societies lived at peace. But when we had some people who came in, even during the time when the white man was administering Africa, I don't think, and I challenge any one of you to tell me where the white man used democracy in administering Africa. I don't think there is any country where the white man stood and said, now we are in Uganda, but we shall be electing the next governor. Was it there?
No.
So I tell you, we have our own ways of governance. I'm not rubbishing democracy, but I'm telling you that we can have some other ways. We are Africans and we know how to do our things our way. So democracy is not something, or human rights is not something that should, bar us from doing what we want. It is something that it just comes naturally, just like you see animals in the jungle. They are living amicably. When a lion is, hungry, could go and feed on the cubs, but then cubs are also feeding on grass. There is some kind of coexistence that we need to have, even when we don't, implement things of democracy, things of human rights. Then, because when people are implementing those things, we see that even the world is running crazy. There are a lot of things that have come in. But I say we just need independence. When we think of democracy, we can do it. When we can think of any other rule of law, we can do it. But as long as we are independent and we don't have anyone on our back saying we gave you this, but you're not doing this, then they're also demanding for the money to take it back to them.
Okay, thank you, Fahad, for that analysis. Let me bring in Clarissa. She had something to add earlier.
Yes, first of all, I had something to add on my brother's point. He was like, the people responsible for the Ugandan date are just doing their own, are just coming up with their own projects. That is what I talked about earlier. These people are greedy. They know what should be done to curb the Ugandan date, the date of Uganda. They know what is supposed to be done so that that date can be curbed. But because of greed, I'm not attacking anyone, but because of greed, these people are not doing the right thing. They're just letting these other Ugandans suffer. Because you can't tell me that you're going to borrow money, a huge sum of money from the World Bank, from IMF, and you're using this money to pay salaries to the MPs, okay? And yet Uganda is continuing to suffer every day. Like they are deep in the villages. People are really suffering in Uganda. So I wonder where this money goes. That is the greed I'm talking about. Those people are greedy. I don't know, but they know what should be done because the Uganda's debt is not so big. It can be curbed. Taxes can be, they can raise taxes, but of course that will be making Ugandans suffer a lot. But they can cut the expenditures. They know what should be done.
Also,
They just don't want to do it.
Yeah, like
Yes, Geofrey.
we have loan money coming along with strings attached on it. And yet, we saw during the pandemic, we had loans for vaccines that were subsidized. Why don't we still have the same? And also, we have this money coming to us because the foreigners have money and they are looking for where to invest it. And we are utilizing it. And then another thing is we need to also look at our level of human resource that is in this country. For example, we have people that have been in offices for a long time. They are doing the same thing. We have graduates that have new ideas, but they are not tapped in the government to work in more sectors. Why do we have people to retire at the age of 65 and you're a permanent secretary in an economic sector that is driving the country? Why don't we have to see these people retire earlier and we have more energetic men, people who have ideas? I believe these people, when you enter office and you start counting money in trillions, your money will keep thinking of trillions. When you have millions, it will really give you a hard time to live that good life. So we have MPs, we have ministers already thinking of bringing us trillions of money that we cannot utilize. We had the COVID pandemic. We had no loans. But then the World Bank comes in and say, you have bounced back. Did we take loans? But basically, we had more of our people focus on their economic sectors that are bringing back return on investment. We saw more people go back to agriculture, and we had high production. But then after that, people in Karamoja suffering from hunger. We shall need to take a loan to build them a lake. Imagine taking a loan to build a lake. In Karamoja, it is already a stranded region. We need to have this money utilized towards investments that bring high return and also can be able to service the loans that we are taking. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Geofrey. At this point, we are going to take a short break and still come back with the students discussing the question, is Uganda's public debt sustainable? See you after the break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that short break. We are still with students of Muteesa First Royal University, and we are discussing the issue of Uganda's public debt. So let me get back to Clarissa. So Clarissa, earlier on you said that the government needs to create a budget for the different loans that they borrow, and as well as they should implement on certain projects like investing in cash crops. So my question to you is, if Uganda creates a budget for these loans and then also implements on the project that you mentioned, then is it okay for the government to borrow?
Thank you. In my opinion, I think it is okay for government to borrow, to seek for external help. Yes, they can borrow money only if they are going to invest in the things that are going to bring about development in the country, like agriculture. Because Uganda claims, Uganda as a country claims to be an agriculture country, agriculture state. And agriculture, in the local things, agriculture is a very, very good field that can yield very huge sums of money for a state like Uganda. So you can find that if Uganda is borrowing money to invest in things like agriculture, or maybe putting up some other developmental strategies, this money that has been borrowed from the IMF, from the World Bank, you're going to find this money coming back in a long run. You're going to find Uganda being able to yield back this money.
Okay.
Yeah, rather than spending money, rather than budgeting for for taking MPs or the big people out of the country for vacations, it's better they start budgeting for things that are going to bring about money in a long run.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me get back to Geofrey. So, Geofrey, earlier on, we said the actual issue in this discussion is the question of, is Uganda's debt sustainable? And earlier you said no. So please expound on that answer.
Well, I could like to start by saying that one of the hardest instances is to understand the real Ugandan debt. Because every minute, every day, every week, every month, we see the government borrowing and signing in to bring in more loans. And also, currently, our rate of borrowing depends on more of the political pressure, where people come in through the parliament to bring on more pressure or request the Ministry of Finance and the heads of state to provide them with money to basically accomplish some projects that are pending. So the more we have political pressure coming onto the Ministry of Finance officials, it will make the government officials make sure they look for more loans to come. And in the forecast, which is not real, because MPs look at solving challenges that are short term. In my region, this is happening. I've collapsed in my area, the hospital needs to be refurbished. My area does not have water, we need this. MPs do not articulate or bring out the real goals where the government really needs to invest in much of its money from their regions. They only focus on what government puts for them on table through the budget. Even when you look at the budget framework, there are less consultations from the people in the community, rather than them looking at estimates of how did we do in 2019, 2020, how did we do in 2018, 2019. They focus on those and then draft a plan. This is how we recovered from COVID. So, with those, we do not see the government leaving out borrowing. They will still remain looking for money to finance these short-term problems, the challenge in the communities, and also accomplishing a few pending works, which does not guarantee us a future free of debts. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Geoffrey. Let me come back to Fahad. So Fahad, earlier you said Uganda's debt is sustainable. Please
Yes.
expound on that.
Yes, I was very clear, and I did say that Uganda's debt is sustainable. It is sustainable when we look back and see what exactly are we using the debt for. Just like I was saying, that when we get this loan, and the loan is in form of expatriates, people who come to train us how things are done out there. Even when we take our own people outside, like in China, like we take them in Wuhan, we see how various things are manufactured. We take them in Japan to see how those Toyota cars are manufactured. Then those countries give us a debt of machinery to bring back to our country. Then I see that that form of debt is something that in the short run, actually in the short run, can, be paid back when we start manufacturing our own cars instead of, importing cars like Toyota V8, those expensive cars. So we start manufacturing them right here. We sell them to ourselves at some good amount of money. Then we can see that we can take back something, and in the short run, we can recover those debts. The other thing as to why I still, stressed that the debt can be sustainable, it is because of, the discoveries that Uganda has made in the long run. Ever since the times Uganda, ended the turmoil, it was in conflict during the times of Idi Amin Dada. There came the dwarf governments, people ruling for about months, a year. Then we came to Yoweri Kaguta Museveni in 1986. So we saw that Uganda started steadily gaining some sort of development. And during that time, up to now, many minerals have been discovered. We have discovered gold. When you go and Google it, you find that Uganda has a chunk of about gold estimated to 37 trillion US dollars. That's a lot of money. We talk about trillion Uganda shillings, but US dollars, you know how much that is? Even when we don't look at any other side and we look at that, when we do the exploration in the Albertine region, we find that Uganda is even still discovering more wells, and companies are bidding to come and do what? And explore that oil. So we see that even when we forget about taxing people, we forget about those other non-tax, things of collecting money, and we look at the minerals that we have been given by nature, we find that we can still sustain the debt, and we can, in the long run, find a solution to all that debt. And Uganda can be at a time like a country called Libya, where it once had no debt from across the globe because of its oil that it was supplying. And that oil was the same thing that was being used to cater for every citizen in that country until 2011, when war broke out. And now Libya is in shambles. But Uganda can still do the same, and we shall live a comfortable life. MPs can eat as much as they want, and people will also be safe. So we have minerals, and we can also look at many other things like bringing in machinery instead of paper money.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me move to Clarissa. Clarissa, you also earlier said to a larger extent, Uganda's debt can be sustainable. So please expound on that answer.
Okay, thank you. To a larger extent, Uganda's debt can be sustainable only if the government officials can come up and make use of the various things that we have as a country. Because in Uganda, we have very good climatic conditions. We have good weather conditions. You can look at countries like Dubai, Saudi Arabia. Those countries they don't have the good weather conditions that we have, but they are rich. So if we can make use of the blessings that God gave us, like the climatic conditions, and maybe start planning and putting up things like we can invest more in agriculture, because Uganda can be too good at agriculture. So you can find land and it has nothing on it, totally nothing. And
Bare land.
and here comes in some government official, and he or she chases away people from this land. Yet people are making use of the land. There's some land. There's land along Mitiana Road. It's a very big land, but people were making use of this land. People were putting up businesses there. People were trying to grow some cash crops, but some official came up and chased those people out of the land. And now it is just bare with nothing being done on it. So if we can look into things and invest more money that we get from the loans in the things that we are very good at, like agriculture, because honestly, we can't say that we are going to invest this money in making cars, because where are we making cars from? Okay, there might be people making cars in Uganda, but that may not be so good as agriculture can be. Yeah, so if we can make good use of our land and climatic conditions and the weather conditions as well, we can come up with something good that can help sustain the date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Clarissa. Let me get back to Geofrey. So, Geofrey, let's talk about Uganda Revenue Authority's capacity to collect revenue. Because as we know right now, URA is collecting both tax revenue and non-tax revenue. Every time we pay for fines, penalties, registration at URSB, all those are now being collected by URA, even tuition for university. Now, according to the Bank of Uganda report for June 2022, URA money collected, the revenue collected by URA increased. However, URA was not able to hit its target. My question to you is, do you think if there's going to reach a point in Uganda where URA can collect money and Uganda funds its own budget?
Yeah, that is true. We can have Uganda fund its budget and also be able to service its debts if we only close the loops in the tax collection space. For example, and there is need to also change in the regulations and policies that are made during tax collection. For example, we have these taxes being diverted to other ways. For example, we have various ministries that are collecting taxes. We have the police governments. We have the armies that are also collecting taxes that they do not report back to URA for accountability and also showing us what's its usage. So URA should devise more ways, for example, through bringing more online payments for paying of taxes and making sure every investment that is done in Uganda has been taxed. For example, why do you need to give a foreigner a tax holiday of 7 years? What are they producing? Can't it be done here, or can't we do it cheaply? We need to reduce on the tax holidays we are giving to foreigners, simply because their money is not taxed, but then they need to take back that money to their homes as profits. Even when someone comes in to set up an industry, you give them a tax holiday of 7 years. They will do their investment, have good return investment, and live in 5 years. That money won't have been taxed. We need to regulate and also make sure that we collect taxes in the right way. If you're taking your goods to Kenya and you're paying high taxes, why do they bring their commodities in Uganda at low tax? We need to shift to make sure that we fit in the current market. If someone taxes you high, you do the same. What goods are you attracting them to bring to your country that cannot be produced? And then we also need to look at the human resource of URA. We need more professionals doing the tax collection, and also them practicing democracy, where we do not want to see people ruling or taking on the top authorities being elected just through maybe political will, goodwill from MPs, the president, the ministers. Let's employ people who have really gotten the right education and the policies that can elevate us, not bringing in people that simply because I came in on political will, if someone who brought me wants someone not to pay taxes, they will deliberately not. And also, there is need to increase on the enforcement. If we can see more army coming in when people have riots, let's have the same army come in to make sure the money that should be collected on the borders is all brought to paper. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me move to Fahad.
Yes, please.
So Fahad, over the years, they tell us URA has failed to hit its target, has failed to hit its target. What do you think are some of the factors?
Pardon me the question?
The different years, every year they come and tell us URA has failed to hit its target in tax collection. What do you think are some of the factors?
I could say that some of the factors which lead to failure by URA to hit its tax target is because of, we have what we call tax evasion. We have a lot of things where people evade, where people do not want to pay taxes. So they kind of trick. Like, for example, there is something going on in America, in the United States, where Donald Trump's company has been now fined about 1.3 billion US dollars because of evading, because of, shunning away from taxes. Because during his time, he used not to pay taxes. Now they've come to paper and they're finding out that the Trump company has not been paying taxes. So now they're finding it to pay the tax that it was once not paying some time back. So here in the country, we also have some companies behaving that way. URA might sit down and say, now we shall get this from these companies, we shall get this from the people. But then at the end of the day, we find some other charismatic people who are very eager to see that how am I going to divert from the way these people are collecting taxes from me. So those companies out there that are being tricky, that are trying to put up things to say that they dodge these taxes, URA should find a solution. Actually, like my brother said, there should be some digital approach, some technological approach to see that these papers are kind of supervised through papers that are on digital form, where we find that these things of, like during the time of hat and gun tax, we used to run into the forest to dodge those officers. That's what actually my fathers told me, that's what my grandfathers told me, that they used to run away so that taxes could not be collected.
They would hide in trees.
Yeah, even not sleep in their houses because they knew the following day, tax collectors would come in. So that is also being done currently, even when that we have a certain form of tax collection that we cannot see physically. But then, what is the solution to that? If URA cannot reach its goal, then it has to sit back and know where the problem is coming from. The problem comes from the people who are not paying tax because they are using some tricks. And the other problem comes when we find that the economy itself is in shambles. We find that money has lost value. So even when you collect a lot of papers, it doesn't sum up to what you want to provide in the next financial year. So they should try, URA and the government at large, specifically the Bank of Uganda, should look for ways of, rejuvenating, of revamping the strength of the currency of Uganda. So we can see that even when you've collected just a little amount of money, but it has value to help out, then URA will have reached a goal in its tax collection.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me move to Clarissa. So, Clarissa, I would like you to conclude on this issue of revenue collection.
Okay.
So, how best can Uganda, and I know solutions came already from Geofrey and Fahad, in your own perspective, how best can Uganda boost its revenue collection?
Thank you. If Uganda can boost revenue collection by giving its citizens a soft landing, like giving them at least a better conditions of work, because very many Ugandans struggle here and there with work, and sometimes it's because of some officials that Ugandans are struggling. So if the government can come up with better conditions for Ugandans to work, these Ugandans can literally gather money and pay off taxes. And also, if the government can come up and maybe reduce on the terms and conditions that it puts up for the big companies in Uganda, you know, those big companies can really come up with some huge money for revenue and taxes. So if the government can as well give them favorable conditions for working or for carrying out their work as companies or organizations, I don't think they can keep dodging taxes. So by doing that, the government can literally gather some good revenue.
Okay.
And also to add something,
Yes,
we
Geoffrey.
need the government to have a regulated business field of play. Let's have the foreigners have at least a more favorable condition than the Ugandans, but not given more favoring conditions.
Geoffrey, now that would make me ask a question. Why? The question of why. Why should foreign investors, because we also have local investors, why should foreign investors be given more favorable conditions than local investors?
Yeah. For example, foreign investors have a wide market and an international approach. So through their big brands that are already built, they can come in, like in Uganda that is not so much exploited, and then do low production, have a low cost on production, but sell more. This will help us bring in more taxes through the export and import of either raw materials or the materials that are sent out as finished products. And also, when we have more of the foreign investors come in, they give more employment opportunities because they come in with large amounts of money that maybe the government or a local investor cannot handle at once and invest. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Let me move to Fahad. So Fahad, how best can Uganda reduce its debt burden?
How best Uganda can reduce its debt burden? Just like I earlier said, let me reiterate on it. Uganda can best reduce its debt burden through, I gave a point which was, increasing taxes from the locals, but that one I called the riskiest thing you can ever do to people amid this kind of economic trial where people are suffering. People cannot sleep even having eaten something, but then you find that you're increasing taxes on everything. That is one of the riskiest things that can be done. And actually, I said earlier that it has led to toppling of many governments, like the government in the Great Sudan, in Sudan, during the time of the leader El Bashir. The prices of bread went high, and it was because of bread that Bashir was ousted from power. Even during the time of Egypt, in Egypt, during the time of a certain president, I'm forgetting the name, but it was still because of the increase in the prices of bread. So we see that when you increase taxes, it is one of the riskiest things you can do, and the government might not survive. But it also helps in doing what? In bringing a lot of revenue to the what? Like Uganda, the URA will get a lot of what? Revenue from the people. But then One thing I can emphasize, and I re-echo it, is to institute what we call the spending cuts. How many municipalities do we have in Uganda? And how many MPs are representing those municipalities in parliament? We have about 460 MPs sitting in parliament. Just of recent, the parliament was being rehabilitated, to accommodate the great number of parliamentarians. How many ministers does Uganda have? About 87 ministers. How many state ministers does Uganda have? About many state ministers. That is all spending. So when you institute spending cuts, when you come to table and you say, but let's merge these municipalities, let's make out provinces, so we can get a few members representing the rest of the Ugandans in parliament, so that we can have a few ministers helping out the executive led by the president in executing their duty, so that we can have a judiciary that doesn't have a lot of judges on board, that doesn't have a lot of lawyers on board, but we see that we can do work efficiently without spending a lot of money. The rest of the money can be brought back into the treasury of the country.
Okay.
And our members of parliament should also be sent out for benchmarking, because there are a lot of things that are done in developed countries that we don't have knowledge about. So let them go to countries like in the Scandinavian countries, they can go to United States and see how is this thing being done. Instead of coming back here and just telling us about democracy, you've not gone to see how America practices its democracy. And I'm assuring you, the things that are being implemented here are not the things that are implemented outside. We need benchmarking to see that at least everything we do is in line with, making us go forward, to do with tax and everything. Otherwise, if we just tend to be copycats, just increasing because of our stomachs, we shall not be running our country in a way it's supposed to be run.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me also get Clarissa's perspective on how Uganda can reduce its debt burden.
Okay, thank you so much. Uganda can reduce its debt budget by facilitating development. Yes, because as a country, when you look at the infrastructure, different infrastructures in Uganda, they are not favorable for Ugandans to carry out proper businesses that can help yield some good money. Remember, it's from this money that government gets revenue. So if the government can really invest in development of the roads and maybe some buildings or hospitals and schools, it can really help, and it can help people be able to yield money from which the government is going to be getting revenue. And the other thing is the government can also try to end low priority programs. There are different programs that the government keeps on funding, and yet they're not a priority for Uganda as a state. For example, there is a time in years, there is a time when some MPs are supposed to go maybe out of the country to attend to some conferences. And such programs, if they are not a priority for a state, Uganda, they can be ended, or they can be put out for some time, so that this money can be reserved for the loan, for the debt, to pay off the debt.
Okay, thank you. Geofrey, so your perspective as well on how best Uganda can reduce its debt burden.
Yeah, one of the things that we need to start is merging of the many organizations that we have in the country running the government. For example, we have the Ministry of Finance, we have Uganda Revenue Authority, and not forgetting about all their third parties in collection of taxes. Then you come to the Ministry of Lands, we have URA, we have UNRA, but all these things can be accommodated in a given organization that can make sure everything is implemented on time. And also we need to make sure all the debt that comes in, or foreign investment, focuses on basically production and export, because we don't have these loans in shillings. We have these loans in dollars, which means we shall have to repay the debts in dollars, which is higher than the shillings that we currently earn. We also need to prioritize a few government and natural resources that we are exploiting currently and not focus them on so much. Like, for example, we have so much hope in the oil, but this oil already has foreign companies that have already invested heavily and waiting to earn their first profits before we utilize it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Geoffrey. So let me get back to Fahad. So government has come up with several projects over the years, especially for the youth. We have had issues of Emyoga, we have had issues of youth livelihood program, Operation Wealth Creation. Now government has even come up with the other general projects that we are seeing. We are seeing parish development model. What is your perspective on the different projects that government has been coming up with for development of generally the population and specifically also for the youth?
Thank you, Madam, for that. I would like to say that I would send a token of thanks to the government for all it is doing, in the programs like Emyoga, the PDM. We see those things being very productive in case their end result was hitting to the target that they are expected to hit. But now you come to a situation where the government is injecting in a lot of money in things like Emyoga. Government is injecting in a lot of money in the PDM. But then you find that money, it is being channeled to other things. Money comes from, the president's office. It gets signed into the local governments. And in the local governments, the way it came from the office of the president or the office of the prime minister, it is not the way it will reach the local government due to, third-party things. Money doesn't come directly from there. There are a lot of officials that have to get access to that money before it comes to the local people. So you find that the president and his body and the rest of Ugandans up there, they have that good heart of helping out Ugandans, but then during the process of bringing that money onto the local people, you find that it doesn't come as it was signed. That is the same problem that we face in institutions. You find that there is a lot of corruption. When things come to third party, things do not work out. So parish development model, then Emyoga and other programs to help alleviate people from poverty are very good programs, but then implementation is still being a very big burden to the country. And then we shall find that the grassroots are not going to benefit in any way. That's my view.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, my last question will go to Clarissa.
Okay.
So, Clarissa, how best can the government equip the youth so that they give big contribution to revenue collection? We have seen issues of unemployment, several issues. How best can the youth be equipped?
Okay, thank you so much. As far as I'm concerned, the youth are supposed to be taking over in this generation. So if the government can render some power to the youth to be coming up with some projects, because these are youths that we are talking about, and they have fresh brains to do very good things. Only that they don't have a startup. So the government can put up some projects. The government can come up with some programs like Emyoga. Yes, it can work for the youths. The government can invest in some money to these youths because most of the youths just need a startup. There are very many youths out there in Uganda who have ideas, very good ideas that can help them come up with something good that will also help the government yield some revenue. So if the government can really give in some things like land, money, and maybe also train up the youths, because yes, they have the ideas of how to make money, but they also need to be shaped in the right way. So if the government can come up with such programs that can help shape the youths and also give them some little money to start up something, they have the brains. They can literally come up with something.
Okay, thank you so much. We are going to have concluding remarks. Since we have come to the end of our talk show for today, I'll start with Geofrey.
Yeah, thank you very much. My final conclusion could be requesting the government officials to basically reduce on their urge to borrow loans and make sure the money that we have should be focused on investment. And also there is need to prioritize youth involvement in the economic building of the country. We need to see more funds that are channeled to innovation and creativity in order to spur production. And also we need to practice democracy, where we have people come to government offices not by goodwill, neither politics, but due to their experience and also what they will be able to put on table for us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Fahad.
My bottom line is literally that the government of Uganda, amid this kind of great burden of a debt, should find a cross-cutting solution. And this solution is what we've been discussing about. I'm quite sure that this burden can be curbed. And by doing so, we have to find ways of curbing the debt burden, like we've been talking. And if all this is put into practice, we shall find that our Uganda becomes a great country, just like other, developed countries. We can, take to listening to the speeches from various people, like the president sometime back said that Uganda is now amongst, the countries that have taken off in development. And that statement was, rebutted by the International Monetary Fund, saying that Uganda is not yet there.
He said we have entered middle income.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking. We've entered into middle income status. But then you find that the international bodies are saying, but even when you want to impress Ugandans, according to the statistics, we see that you're nowhere. So when we stop listening to such speeches of entertainment, we need to go back on table and find out what exactly is the problem and how exactly are we going to find solution to a problem. There are a lot of things, just like we've deliberated, and if all those things are put into practice, we shall find that we ourselves and our children will be benefiting and having a great stay in their country, Uganda. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Fahad. Let me bring in Clarissa.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, in the final analysis, I would like, first of all, to thank the government for the various things that it has been able to come up with to help Ugandans come up with some businesses that can help them yield some money to hold up with the living in Uganda. And I'll urge, I'll say something to the government officials that are in charge of the Ugandan debt, that these people should develop some love for the country, because if they really develop that love for the country Uganda, they'll be able to invest this money that comes from the loans, from the debt, from the loans. They'll be able to invest it somewhere that is good, somewhere that this money will be yielded, okay? They'll be able to invest it where it's going to work better, but not in buying posh cars, going out for vacations, and all sorts of things. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. We have come to the end of our talk show for today. I would like to say thank you to Muteesa the first, right?
Yeah, the first.
Okay, so Fahad prefers to call it Muteesa the first rather than Muteesa 1.
I was also recorrected by one of the officials there.
Oh, okay. So thank you so much to Muteesa the First Royal University for gracing our invitation and coming on the talk show. Thank you, Fahad, Clarissa, and Geofrey, for sparing time to come and discuss with us the state of Uganda's public debt. I would like to say thank you so much to Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV for organizing the Inter-University Debate, which is a platform where university students are able to discuss these issues. Issues to do with public debt are issues that, in my opinion, members of the public and students, the youth specifically, need to have an opinion on. And thank you to Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV for giving the platform for members of the public and specifically for inter-university debate, the students who are able to discuss some of these issues. Thank you from us, and thank you to the viewers for watching. See you again next week, same time. Bye.